they need something to relate to. And if they don't have something to relate to, they're not going to be able to connect with you.
What if the kids we label as troubled are actually the ones we failed to see in time? One mentor story shows how early connection can change everything. This conversation asks, what changes when communities stop seeing vulnerable youth as problems to be managed and start seeing them as young people in need of support? Hi, I'm Delaney. I'm a student here at Vanguard University, and I help produce this show. Today, Sandie talks with Martha Trujillo, founder of Full Circle Orange County. Martha works with at-risk youth through mentorship, workshops, and prevention education, shaped by lived experience and academic training. And now, here's their conversation.
Martha Trujillo, you have been here at Vanguard several times, but this is your first time as an Ending Human Trafficking podcast guest. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
I think I have been so inspired by you, and I'm amazed at what you do with our youth every year in No More Do Better. And how does it make you feel to stand in front of hundreds of middle schoolers and be part of their prevention story?
I think it's super inspiring, and I'm very humble to be asked to be, for the third year, the speaker for this event. I think as much as it's also prevention, it's also intervention, because some kids are actively probably experiencing some things, but nonetheless, to prevent future harm from happening is such a testament to my life. And it's adding so much more to me, because it also reminds me why we do this work as a collective community, and just seeing all the different organizations here and working collaboratively. It's just so heartwarming to see that connection.
Well, this year we had 659 middle schoolers, and they were just hanging on your every word. If you think about classroom management this time of the season and kids are scrolling or chatting, no, they were absolutely quiet. And what a joy to get to have you now on the podcast. And you actually have finished your master's. You've launched your own organization. What is Full Circle Orange County about?
So I'm glad you asked that question, because I just recently revamped everything a little bit. But my mission and vision for my organization is, the mission is to prevent youth incarceration in adulthood. And it really stuck out to me with incarceration. That's the ultimate thing I want to prevent. And it took some time for me to try to understand what it is I'm trying to do with this work with incarceration, because a lot of victims, like myself, as a survivor, we were not ever identified as such. And so I want to help a lot of kids to be identified early on as victims, opposed to just being criminals, right? So Full Circle really supports youth where they're at, in group homes, detention centers, in the community, and I provide schools as well. Just workshop-based mentoring, which is something I kind of created on my own, which is something I love to do. So I love mentoring and I love doing workshops. So I combine both. And so I do mentoring in real time with the youth while I'm doing a workshop. So I do a little bit of that. I support them with reentry services. So any money that I get through my organization, I support them with food, clothing, any type of a bus pass, shoes. For Christmas, I gave 30 LA County youth $50 gift cards to DoorDash, and then $25 gift cards to Amazon. So it's just amazing to do this for them and give them gifts. But essentially, I provide workshops and I teach them about gang prevention or intervention if they're already in a gang, human trafficking, exploitation, because that sometimes goes hand in hand and they're not two separate entities. And I love doing it. I just love mentoring kids and going places and providing them my insight. And I swear to you, Dr. Sandie, as much as I can have 650 kids listen to me in a stadium, it's the same thing if I have 2 or 5 or 10 students in front of me. And I find that so rewarding.
Wow. I love that analogy, 2 or 3 or 650. It doesn't matter. So let's go back and let's talk about how you began to see your personal journey from adversity to education and advocacy of how you integrate your support, your mentoring for other youth. And I especially feel like the focus is often just keep the kids safe, but
Mhm.
we don't look ahead to when they're adults and might become part of on a path for
Mhm.
incarceration. So talk to us about your journey.
Okay, so my journey with education. Let's start with education. I feel that with that journey, it wasn't always great. I loved learning. Don't get me wrong, but I think as a young person, I didn't have too much support with understanding or having the education tailored to my needs. Correct? Like I didn't have no IEP, even though I probably needed one. My mom wasn't really in the mix of all that stuff after we got back with my mom got custody of me and my sister after being in foster care. So me just being like in juvenile hall, being on probation, getting arrested so many times, education was always at a touch for me, but I wanted it. So I think I just educated myself a lot. In juvenile hall, I read one of the books that I really liked was what was it called? The Count de Monte Cristo. And that
Oh,
book was just so like it was such a revelation because I it's crazy how that literature, even though it's very old, I connected with it. And I found that when he was incarcerated, again, like he wasn't supposed to be there. And so like he was getting mentored by somebody in there as well. And he was using your time wisely was essential, right? So then I started just writing and reading and educating myself. So I think education started in a very dark place and it stayed there for a long time. But then I started evolving from there. And I think where my journey for advocacy really started to flourish was when I started working at STRTPs with Creighton Services. I think that's where I had met Kendra a few times and some other great people. Great organization, gave me the opportunity. I didn't have no skills yet as far as like working. Well, I didn't have that many skills, I guess you can say, working with youth, but I know that I wanted to do it and it connected with me. So I learned a lot there. That's the first time I learned about the term CSEC.
so you're using lots of acronyms, and we have listeners all over the nation, the world. And so let's break them down a little
For
bit. You
sure.
just said STRTP. What is that? Is that something you use to ride a horse?
Thank you for letting me know. I'll definitely speak a little more, Lena. Okay. So it's a short-term therapeutic program, treatment program. So
Okay.
it's supposed to support youth in foster care or probation. Sometimes kids are dual status. I was a dual status kid. What that means is you're probation and a foster kid. So you're both.
Does that feel from a personal perspective like a double whammy?
Yeah,
Like you had two
for sure.
strikes before you even walked out the front door?
Because it's like this, Dr. Morgan, and I think this is what I've always had to struggle with throughout my whole life. I felt like the probation part of it, the criminal stuff of it, like outweighed the foster kid stuff. Mind you, I went to foster care way before I ever became, criminalized by the system. You know what I'm saying? So like, or got incarcerated. I got incarcerated at 13. I went into foster care at 10. However, for some reason, even going into foster care, and being jumped into a gang, 'cause I'm like the same age at 10, everything bad outweighed everything that was being done against me. I feel like I was the one that was perpetrating all these different things to myself. And it wasn't that way. It was the other way around. Like I couldn't see past the labels that were given to me. So nobody really explained what foster care was to me. I didn't understand none of these labels fully until I was an adult. Until I started going to
Mm,
college, community college, and they're like, "Oh, there's foster youth services." I'm like, "What does that mean, foster youth services? Like, why does that matter?" I didn't like those
mm.
terms. I would never would have shared those terms out loud because I felt they made me feel I thought they would have made other students look at me like, you're different. I was already a young mom. Not many students were moms at that time either. So I'm like, I'm already a non-traditional student as it is. Like, why do I got to add all these different labels? But I did accept them because there was so much support and I needed it badly.
Okay, so this was your on-ramp to get the kind of services and support that you needed. So
Yeah.
let's start with, you mentioned you were 10 years old. Where were you when you were 10 years old?
Well, geographically, I was here in Orange County in Fullerton, still living here. I love my city. And I was, yeah, I think 10 years old was such a pivotal moment for me because I feel like that's where I just left my childhood. And I think 10 years old is still so young for a kid to say like, oh, I'm not a kid no more. Um, it's so sad. So I do think back a lot. When I do share my story, I'm like, wow, 10-year-old kids are, when I see them happy and enjoying their life, like my son, he's 11 now, and that kid still goes to sleep with a teddy bear. I'm like, okay, I'm doing a good job. He's not growing up too quick. You know what I'm saying?
That's so good.
But at 10 years old, I was already smoking weed and doing crystal meth. So it's like, like what type of guidance was I really getting? Not the right kind, right? So at 10 years old, I was already living a very chaotic life.
And by the time you were 13?
13, I caught my first case because I was already a gang member, quote unquote, right? Gang affiliated. And going to juvenile hall was a whole freaking, I'm not gonna say bad words. Like, it was a mind trip.
Yeah.
It was a mind trip. And I think that it made me feel a little bit exploited because you have to get nude in front of people. I had already been sexually active in ways that I shouldn't have been with older people, right? And so but I still feel very vulnerable to do this in front of these professionals, right? So it just felt really weird. So at that point, I just felt really off.
So let's think about how you, in overcoming those challenges, how does that influence the way you work with students who are in similar struggles?
I try to use my lived experience, my experiences that I've encountered to shape my workshops. I back up my workshops with my academic experience and my work experience. So I'm very blessed to have all three type of experiences, working hands-on with kids through work, my academic background, and then my lived experience, right? I think all three really go hand in hand with each other, and I use it very, wisely. But I will say that my lived experience, my survivor-led workshops, is led by that experience first and foremost because it's important. And when I say that, I mean like I use approaches that many people might not use often. I have this thing called feeding before teaching. So before I even do a workshop with youth, I break bread with them. I make sure that we're eating before I nourish them. I provide them something. Like, they're allowing me into their space. I want them to feel I want to feel thankful and honored and show them that they allowed me in their space by providing them with this offering. Like, here, guys, I love you guys so much. Thank you for having me here. We're going to eat real quick as a community. And then I'm going to teach you guys something real cool, something informative. And then I think that by doing that, it shows a lot, because I remember being a kid and just always being hungry, just being hungry. And when people would go to maybe the neighborhood, there's a park and I do remember him, Mr. Silva. He's from the Fullerton School District, and he would bring pizza. And as much as sometimes we didn't like him because he was a math teacher, but he brought pizza. We started connecting with him. We're like, all right, and you're down to come to our neighborhood? All right, cool. That's something else too. We're over there smoking and drinking and doing all sorts of stuff. But the fact that they're able to meet us where we're at in the most chaotic depressive way that we are connecting, like, because we were all depressed. All of us, now I think back, like, we were all so lost. And we just wanted to have somebody understand us, but we were doing it in such, non-healthy ways. But everything that I do, I try to connect it back on doing things for the kids differently. And it works, Sandie. Like, it works. And I get so much good feedback from the way that I do my workshops. So much so that I was able to start a business. So it's like, that just shows testament of the work that I do and the love that I have for the kids and how much we have to support them and guide them.
So here's my dilemma. I try to encourage people to do prevention with kids at an early age. And when I first started trying to get into high schools, I had high school principals tell me that the subject was too mature and the students wouldn't understand. Well, I don't believe that.
No.
But I do understand that not every 10-year-old is going to be in the same situation.
True.
But I think we're waiting too long to start prevention. And so I'd love to have your insight. You have an 11-year-old. So if I think about, am I reaching out to Martha when she was 10 or to an 11-year-old who goes to bed with a teddy bear? What is the range of prevention and conversations we can have with a 10-year-old?
My son is very intuitive and he's very smart, but he also is very curious. And I think let's take away the intuition and the smartness, right? They're curious. Kids are always going to be curious, right? And they're living in a digital world. Not only is digital access accessible at home, but it's at school as well now. You know what I'm saying? Which I have my own beliefs on, that type of stuff. But I think that because of kids living in a digital world, their mind capacity to understand things is at a higher level. And I think that the age range should be from like 9 to like 14. Like, we should start early prevention then. And it doesn't have to be like straight up like, okay, you guys, like, this is commercial sexual, like using those terms, because they might feel a little uncomfortable. They may know certain things, but like, my kid does not like to, if I'm watching a movie, I gotta be very careful, like, about what I'm watching, because if he sees even kissing, he starts feeling like, that's cooties. I'm like, but that's good, right? Like, that means he hasn't been exposed to things that are harmful. But I don't want my kid living under a rock either. So I need him to be careful about certain things and everywhere he goes. So I think early prevention needs to be spoken about in a manner that's appropriate for their age, but also not to be scared to talk to them about it, and not thinking that it's only for certain kids that live in poverty-stricken like environments. No, it has to be all around, because I did a presentation a CSIC presentation for a Catholic church, mind you. I thought this was going to be like a very hard conversation to have with these communion kids, but they were so open in La Habra. No, sorry. Yeah, in La Habra, yeah. And the people were so open to it. And it was amazing. The kids were so receptive. They let me speak exactly what it was. And the beautiful thing about that, and that I loved, and I'm so glad that I was able to do that, is because when I grew up Catholic, and when I was going through my first communion and my confirmation, I was already getting trafficked. And so like my connection with God, going through these classes with the people at the time, was horrible, because I'm already here thinking like, I'm condemned to hell. Clearly, like, I've already done every sin in the book. I'm going to hell. So I remember going to these classes and they're talking about this and that, and they're putting these graphic videos of abortion, and I'm just like, I had, already gone through something like that because the sexual activity with older people that I was encountering at that time. So I'm already thinking like, there's no way I'm able to confess to this priest of what I'm going to be doing. I mean, what I'm doing, how do I get help? And I just feel being able to have done that presentation for those kids and prevent them or give them that awareness, like Dr. Sandie, you should have seen the love from not just the staff of that church, but from the kids, the respect. And then also it made me recognize and believe that, you know what, I'm in the right place. And all that I went through was for a reason. And I'm able to share this story. And I was able to connect that with them and show them my picture when I was doing my confirmation and how innocent I looked. But deep inside, like I was going through a living hell because I was going through trafficking.
Wow. So the name of your organization, Full Circle, that's definitely full circle.
Yeah.
You're so kind to share such personal memories, but it's very meaningful and I appreciate it so much. I think it probably influences the way you do mentorship.
Mhm.
Can you talk about how mentorship factors into your work?
Mentorship is a big component. So the 3 pillars that I have is community, mentorship, and education. Mentorship being a strong one, right? Because if we don't have if young kids don't have a good mentor in their lives that can support them through what they're going through at the moment. And when I say that, it's like a mentor has to be appropriate for that person at that time. So I feel like lived experience does have a lot to play with that, but everybody has certain lived experience with how they've lived, right? And I think I sometimes take a very like controversial take on lived experience because I tell when I train people, I say lived experience, you have lived experience, you have lived experience, but we often don't know how to build rapport with kids because they're trained by agencies to say, don't share too much personal information, don't share too much of that you're crossing boundaries. And I think that there's a level of boundaries we have to still stick to, don't get me wrong, but if someone has encountered something when they were young that they can relate to a young person, um, that's something they can teach them, a teachable moment, like remind them that we're not just adults trying to like impose rules on them. We have at one point overcome a lot of things ourselves when we were young, and we use that as a way, as a technique and a tool to guide them and build that connective rapport with them. They need something to relate to, and if they don't have something to relate to, they're not going to be able to connect with you.
So you're pointing at me and saying, you have lived experience, and you're pointing over there, you have lived experience. How do the people in the room respond to that?
They respond very well. And I've done a training for CASA of OC where they mentor kids. They have foster
Mm.
kids, right? Foster kids, or they have dual status kids, but mainly foster youth, right? But within the system. But sometimes they have dual status youth that sometimes they don't know how to manage because they're either gang affiliated, as typically that often happens, or either incarcerated. So it's a lot more to handle, I would say. Not chaotic, but more to handle for a youth, right? But
More
they
to
take it,
handle. That's so kind.
yeah, they ask questions. I'm very open, sharing certain things, but I try to say that because I wish that the people within that I had immediately when I was a kid were able to share certain things and not just impose rules and this and that. Like, I didn't need a ex-veterana chola, like, all the time to be like, hey, dude, like, I got through this and, you can do it. Like, no, it's okay to just share, like, you know what? I made it out of certain lifestyle. You can make it out. And that person can be so much different than me. And I say that because there was not many people representative of me that made it out the streets. And when I say me, I don't know, I'm not pointing to me as saying like a Mexican female person. I'm just saying someone that just made it out the damn streets that can tell me a freaking good experience of how they made it out and connect with me. But it was like pulling teeth sometimes. I was always asking questions like, how are you when you were a kid? And they're just, wow, don't ask me those questions. I'm like, all right, my bad. I just wanted to know, like, how did you get to where you're at? Because I know that everybody has a story. And I was just always
Mm.
curious. I was always just curious about that story.
How did you get to where you are? That's such a great question. I'm going to write it down and start using it. And obviously, you have told us how you got to where you
Yeah.
are now, and that inspires us. It also challenges us to
Yeah.
use our own experiences and not just tell somebody else's story.
Yeah.
But our kids are facing systemic barriers.
Mm-hmm.
And these are kids who already have some kind of risk. The whole issue around dual status kids, I remember first learning that phrase that meant they were in our child welfare system
Mm-hmm.
because they weren't in a safe environment. So we may have put them in foster care. But now, because they've interacted with law enforcement
Mm-hmm.
in some kind of justice issue, now they're on probation, they're in juvenile detention. And I think one of the key things for me about that dual status is they didn't move from child welfare. We
Mm-hmm.
care about making sure you become a healthy adult.
Yeah.
They just had to add on an extra bucket of resources as a dual status kid. Now, our juvenile justice system is designed to rehabilitate.
Mm-hmm.
It's designed to restore justice, to make things right. You've like pushed my buttons, Martha. Um, Dual status is not a bad label. It's we still see you as a child,
Yeah.
and we are here to help you get on the right
Yeah.
path. And our juvenile justice system has a lot more resources to better support them.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to quit preaching and
No, you're doing good.
yeah, and I want to look ahead at what are your hopes, your goals for Full Circle, and really, how do you include your community of educators, advocates, policymakers, people like me? Every time I have a conversation with you, I take away something I can use in the work in our community. But what are your hopes?
My hopes is to continue trying to get into trying to get up to the table, get in any room that I can to share my experiences and my academic expertise, right? I'm currently waiting to get into a PhD program at UC Irvine in education. I do have hopes of opening up my own school, alternative education learning center, that I can apply everything that I've learned and have a system that can support youth that are, typically non-traditional. And I think right now I'm working super hard in getting into different conferences to be a speaker. I just came back from Texas doing a gang intelligence conference out there. Super well received. They loved it. And I feel like I always get good feedback because not just because I'm sometimes super funny, but also because I hit everything and the mark is very relatable, and it's I don't water myself down no more, Dr. Sandie. I think that there's something that I have and something that everything that I've gone through, but also just the person that I am inside that was never taken from me, wasn't able to, well, at one point it was taken from me. I was able to restore it, and I don't want to lose it ever again. I want to be able to be me and be Martha um, and share this, passion that I have to support kids and open up, sometimes traditional discussions on things and show how we need to better identify youth early on, especially if they are involved with systems that we typically right away say that, oh, that's a bad kid. I'm like, that's not a bad kid, that's a youth that needs support, so just looking at it with a different lens, different perspectives, and challenging that perspective for sure. But I just have hopes of continuing to do what I'm doing and reaching bigger audiences. And but I do think that doing the local work here in my community, it brings it brings such comfort to me because I feel like had I, made it and I dipped out of Fullerton, Orange County and I lived somewhere else, and I feel like there's something within me that's telling me, like, don't let those kids not make it out or not see the way that you're seeing things now. And I just feel like I have this testimony to tell them, like, you guys, like, young girls and young boys, like, going through these challenges that sometimes people think they're self-inflicted. They're not, but please ask for support. There's a way out. There's a way to ask for help. There's a way to seek these basic needs that you guys need without having to put yourself in situations that are going to be harmful to you, even though you think that you're causing the harm and you're not. And I think more families need help. I don't think there's always, bad families or, labeling them like that. I think sometimes people are just trying to survive in it. And in that survival, sometimes, kids are left unsupervised and, parents are just trying to make it and it sucks, and sometimes kids feel neglected and they hold that against their parents. And now as a parent myself, I look at my mom, I'm like, just like, I'm so sorry for having to put you through all that. But also I tell her as well, like, but you hurt me as well by, having done that to yourself. And so it's like a lot of healing as a process. And I'm 31 and we're still trying to like repair that. But I get it. Like, I get it now. And that's why I hover over my son from but I still give him his space. But I think that my hopes is just for every child to be able to have a childhood that's worthwhile, and I just want to see more happy faces of kids, and I don't want to see kids in detention centers or families that are ripped apart, or, I know it's difficult, and I just think that as a community, Orange County is doing so good, and just events like No Better, like No More Do Better. Like, if I had that, Sandie, when I was a kid, that would have been amazing.
Well, we're going to make sure we put a link to that in the show notes for this episode, this interview. I want to land on my appreciation and admiration for you. 31 years old, you have a bachelor's in criminal justice from Cal State University. You have a master's in criminology from UC Irvine. I did not have those kinds of accomplishments by the time I was your age. I did have an associate degree in nursing, but I do want people to hear in this interview your high value for the academic path you have pursued. And you have combined the academic and the lived experience. And you're a unicorn, you're a unique advocate, and we are grateful for you being part of our community and our efforts to do prevention right here in our schools.
Yeah. And I think and I want to just share this because I want to give a shout out to my district, the Fullerton School District, and specifically Ms. Rosanna Fonseca. She goes to the No More Do Better all the time and Ms. Ruthie, obviously, because Ms. Ruthie gave me the opportunity of a lifetime, and she helped me connect, and she gave me the time, and it's crazy to think and look back, and it is all full circle. But when I was expelled from Nicholas Junior High, in the Fullerton School District, I was expelled right after I got out of foster care. 2 weeks into the school, in 8th grade, I got expelled for bringing drugs on campus, right? Like, okay. But what the beautiful part is that in 2024, I believe, I'm not getting my dates wrong, Ms. Rosanna had done a assembly speech for Ladera Vista in Fullerton and for the kids that were getting in fights and stuff like that. But after that, she calls me and she's like, Martha, how would you like to promote with the 8th graders from Nicholas Junior High? And I was like, oh my God. So that's when I said it's full circle. That was it. That was the last thing I needed. And I got my Nicholas promotion certificate from the principal with the kids. And it's like honoring me. Like, it's like, it's such a, they saw me and I just felt so seen and so loved and so appreciated. And, I was able to give a little speech real quick and a little blurb about like, where I was at and being here today and what that meant. And I just felt so loved in that moment to be able to do that. And that's when everything just tied back, like from getting expelled there. I got every other educational like certificate or whatever, but that was the missing one, like, and they
Oh my
gave it to me.
goodness.
So that's a full circle.
Oh, Martha, that's a wonderful way to end today's conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your lived experience, your academic knowledge, and your heart and passion to serve. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to Martha Trujillo for reminding us that prevention can begin with something as simple and as powerful as connection. Her feeding before teaching approach shows us that trust, care, and practical support can open the doors for real mentorship. Listeners, if you loved this conversation, make sure to check out our website at endinghumantrafficking.org for tons of in-depth show notes and other resources. If you'd like to help us grow this podcast, you can start by sharing this episode with someone and connecting with us on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. And as always, thanks for listening.